Well, it's President's Day. We've got something. We used to have George Washington's birthday. Now we've got a day for all of them. They got some great leaders, and we're going to talk about some of them today, some of the founders of this great nation. Well, right now, churches in South Florida have reached out with hope after last week's horrible school shooting. Some of those church members were personally affected by the deadly attack.
A few of the students are turning to activism as critics are raising questions about the role of the FBI. Eric Rosales brings us the story from Florida.
Members of the Broward County Sheriff's Department still has a local high school on lockdown, gathering evidence and collecting from the crime scene. Meanwhile, the first of many of the 17 funerals are starting to take place. People tell me that they are relying on their faith to get them through this tragedy.
A lot of us are going through different emotions today. Some of us are just in this state of shock right now. We're in utter disbelief. We're like, how in the world did this happen?
On Sunday, church leaders throughout the community rallied on the Word of God to help bring healing in the aftermath of the deadly Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School shooting.
The motto of our church is loving God, loving people, and showing it. And this is our opportunity to really put that face out there.
Some of us lost friends, some of us lost neighbors, some of us, know of someone that's hurt, so we're all here to just console one another.
On Saturday, Donald Trump and the First Lady visited a Pompano Beach hospital, thanking doctors and nurses for their response.
Fantastic hospital, and they have done an incredible job. The doctor was amazing. We saw numerous people and incredible recovery.
His visit sparked angry demonstrators who gathered outside the federal courthouse in Fort Lauderdale, calling on lawmakers to change the nation's gun laws.
If all our government and president can do is send thoughts and prayers, then it's time for victims to be the change that we need to see.
CBN News has uncovered new details about accused shooter 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz. Public court records show Cruz was unstable and violent to himself, posting social media videos cutting himself. His public defender said Cruz is willing to plead guilty to avoid the death penalty. The Broward County Sheriff said his office received more than 20 calls about Cruz in the last few years. He adds his deputies had recovered several of Cruz's cell phones, which paint a more detailed picture about him, but he wouldn't elaborate. And also a stunning admission from the FBI.
We truly regret any additional pain that this has caused.
The agency admits that they were warned about Cruz 6 weeks ago after someone called the tip line with information about Cruz's gun ownership, a desire to kill people, and disturbing social media posts. But the agency dropped the ball. The news angered many.
17 innocent lives were taken from us because they failed to do this. They failed our school and they failed Parkland.
FBI Director Christopher Wray says he is still gathering information, but he does plan to get down to the bottom of what exactly happened. Meanwhile, Christians here in South Florida say that they will rely on Jesus and the power of prayer to heal. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Parkland, Florida.
Well, thank you, Eric. There's more and more suspicion being pointed at the FBI. We rely on the FBI to do a great deal in terms of domestic counterterrorism work. And the fact that they have a clear word coming to a tip line, there should be a procedure that says, look, this is priority one and it should move to the head of the line. I'm sure they have thousands of tips that they can ignore, but something like this was so specific. He said, I am the school shooter. This man, they had clear and unmistakable evidence that this young man was capable of this kind of an action. And because the FBI did nothing, hundreds of people were suffering and scores were, how many was it, 19?
Well, there were 17 killed. But there were 39 visits by the police to this individual's home. Plus, you've got the tip that you just mentioned, so you would think that they would do the math and say this is very, very serious.
Well, they've got to have a priority system, and this clearly rises above just noise. This is a specific threat, And they should have acted on it. And had they acted on it and taken this young man into custody, then a number of wonderful people wouldn't be dead. And so there's suffering parents, grieving churches, grieving families because of inactivity. And as Wendy pointed out, there are many other tip line calls that were made to identify the fact. I don't know what procedure we've got in law that can, you know, you have to wait for somebody to kill people before you can arrest him. I mean, there's got to be something that you can act on, something as concrete as this was. And I think the FBI is more and more coming under pressure because of the clear bias that they showed against Trump prior to the election. And this stuff going on, I mean, it's not a good thing. The FBI should be above reproach. And, you know, I was involved in helping them. They had a Vesper service, and I spoke, and they gave me a plaque or something. And I really liked what they were doing, and I'm a great supporter of the FBI. But what we've seen recently, the leadership has failed the FBI and failed our nation. Well, in other news, President Trump is fighting back on Twitter over the new charges in this Russian investigation. John Jessup has that.
Thanks, Pat. The president fired off a series of tweets this weekend following special counsel Robert Mueller's indictment of more than a dozen Russians accused of meddling in the 2016 election in an effort to help then-candidate Trump. Jenna Browder brings us that story.
President Trump is venting his frustration with the Russia investigation, launching a tweet storm over the weekend. If it was the goal of Russia to create discord, disruption, and chaos within the U.S., then with all of the committee hearings, investigations, and party hatred, they have succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. The tweets came after special counsel Robert Mueller indicted 13 Russians and 3 Russian companies accused of meddling in the 2016 election in an effort to help Trump.
There has been no collusion. I call it the Russian hoax. The entire thing has been a witch hunt.
Critics say Trump isn't doing enough against Russia after he claimed in the past.
It could be Russia, but it could also be China. It could also be lots of other people. It also could be somebody sitting on their bed that weighs 400 pounds, okay?
With Trump now arguing, I never said Russia did not meddle. The Russian hoax was that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. It never did. In another tweet, Trump also disagreed with National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster for this comment.
With the FBI indictment, the evidence is now really incontrovertible.
Trump tweeting, General McMaster forgot to say that the results of the 2016 election were not impacted or changed by the Russians. A key point in the charges came from Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who oversees Mueller and the investigation, and also says Russian meddling did not have any effect on the outcome of the election. These charges aren't the final word for Mueller, who has yet to finish his investigation into the Trump campaign. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thank you, Jenna. Cyber threats go far beyond Russian online propaganda, including spying, corporate espionage, and potential threats to American infrastructure. So to address the concerns that can affect all people in all walks of life, Regent University held a cybersecurity summit late last week. Hundreds gathered to learn how to protect themselves and businesses, as well as city government and healthcare from hackers. Speakers from Google, Hewlett-Packard, the FBI, GE Healthcare, and other major organizations addressed the attendees.
Even though it's such an overwhelming domain, cybersecurity, that there are experts, that there's information available, that there are smart ways to think about cybersecurity and cyber technologies, and in smart ways to act on those technologies and how we use them, how we prepare ourselves to educate the next generation. I think another key part is educating the workforce.
The summit also included Regent's Executive Leadership Series luncheon featuring world-famous hacker Kevin Mitnick, who used to be one of the FBI's most wanted. And Pat, today he is a security consultant for the government.
Well, I might say I'm so pleased. We have installed at Regent University a cyber range. It is perhaps the most sophisticated at any university in the United States. And it can enable a team of so-called C-level executives to war game potential hackers and cyber attacks and fight back against it. So they can, what if somebody's hacking your business? This cyber range will identify where it's coming from, what it is, and then train people how to respond. So Region right now, by the way, has got a cyber and digital forensics. It has a cybersecurity specialist. It has information system technology and computer science, all being offered at Region University. That's the number. If you're interested in a degree in cybersecurity, and it used to be 1 million, now I'm told there's as many as 6 million jobs available in cybersecurity. I mean, if you want to be guaranteed work, this is the place to get it. I met with a man on Friday who's informed in this very much, and he says, we're all being hacked by the Chinese. Everybody's being hacked. Nobody can stop the Chinese hacking. And he said his company has developed a technology, at least a hardware, that is not hackable. But he said the Chinese are hacking everything.
So the hackers need it's whoever can be the best hacker, right? That's
they're all being hacked. Everything is and everything is available, and it's just. But this, we had at this luncheon a man who was saying, all right, you can have a credit card in your pocket.
Right.
Somebody can stand next to you with a particular device and read that credit card. All he's got to do is just stand next to you. Oh, and, you never know when they're...
That's scary.
It is scary. But anyhow, hey, here's something that, gives us hope. Hungary, her prime minister has made a statement that I think is worthy of note, and John has that.
That's right, Pat. Turning overseas, Hungary's prime minister says Christianity is Europe's last hope. Viktor Orban addressed Europe's migration in his State of the Nation speech Sunday. He warned politicians in Brussels, Berlin, and Paris who favor migration have, quote, opened the way to the decline of Christian culture and the advance of Islam. He also spoke of a Western Europe overtaken by Muslims, adding his government will oppose migration efforts by the United Nations and the European Union. Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is making clear Israel will take direct action against Iran if necessary. That warning came as Netanyahu and Iran's foreign minister faced off at a global security summit in Munich, Germany. Chris Mitchell brings us that story.
At the conference, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held up a piece of an Iranian drone shot down over Israel just last week.
Iran also denies that it committed an act of aggression against Israel last week, that it sent a drone into our airspace to threaten our people. Well, here's a piece of that Iranian drone, or what's left of it after we shot it down. I brought it here so you can see it for yourself. Mr. Zarif, do you recognize this? You should. It's yours. You can take back with you a message to the tyrants of Tehran. Do not test Israel's resolve.
Zarif dismissed Netanyahu's claim.
You were the audience for a cartoonish circus, which does not even deserve a dignity of a response.
Zarif denied Iran wants to dominate the Middle East.
We believe in and have proposed creating what we call a strong region, rather than a strong man in the region. We do not want to be the hegemon in the region, as we believe the era of hegemony is long past.
But Netanyahu reiterated Iran's goal to dominate the region.
And nowhere are Iran's belligerent ambitions clearer than in Syria. There, Iran hopes to complete a contiguous empire, linking Tehran to Tartus, the Caspian to the Mediterranean. For some time, I've been warning about this development. I've made clear in word and deed that Israel has red lines it will enforce. Israel will continue to prevent Iran from establishing a permanent military presence in Syria. Israel will continue to act to prevent Iran from establishing another terror base from which to threaten Israel.
Netanyahu reminded the leaders from around the world the lesson of history when Britain's Neville Chamberlain signed the Munich Agreement, appeasing Adolf Hitler that led to World War II.
And 80 years ago, another event took place here with far-ranging consequences. A disastrous agreement was signed here that set the world on a course towards history's most horrific war. 2 decades after a war that claimed 16 million lives, the leaders who met in Munich chose to appease Hitler's regime rather than confront it.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Pat, Israel continuing to sound the alarm there.
Well, they should. You look at Lebanon, you look at Syria, you look at Hezbollah, you look at the various agencies that Iran sponsors, and there is no question that they are the leading exporter of terrorism in the world. There's no question about it. There are more acts of Iranian aggression against the United States, against Israel, against the free world than any other country in the world. And they now are going for nuclear weapons. They have launch vehicles that can deliver nuclear weapons, or at least they're trying to get them. And we cannot stand idly by. This ill-fated nuclear accord that Obama agreed to was just a farce. And it just gave the Iranians all kinds of leeway on the way to a guaranteed nuclear weapon. And a nuclear-armed Iran is just not something that we can tolerate. And Netanyahu, I'm just so shocked that the police in his own country aren't aware of the dangers that Israel and the rest of the world faces from the revolutionary nations that are, threatening our civilization. This man needs to be supported by his people. He needs to stand strong. And if there's some kind of little financial thing along the way where he took some suits or something, whatever they claim he's gotten, it pales into insignificance in relation to the threat that Israel faces. So I hope they'll leave him alone, Wendy.
I do too. I do too. He is a great leader.